And joining me live now, long-time Labor strategist and also former Liberal Party leader, John Hewson joins me live. I just get a comment from you. You know, we don't really want to speculate. The policeman was being very circumspect about why he's saying that there was no political motivation or religious or ideological motivation. He wouldn't say that, but they have had a chat with the man who's in a bad way in hospital. But just an explosion of this kind in Canberra. John Hewson, I mean, you spent many years there. You still go there a lot. Very unusual.
It is unusual, and it's, you know, sort of not too far from Capitol Hill in that sense. I mean, it's I think it was in Deakin.
Yeah.
You know, it raises questions about basic security, but we can't speculate about the motive here, because if it's not a terrorist incident, and if it's not you know, religiously or ethnically motivated and so on, I mean, there are probably a host of personal reasons behind this that doesn't do any of us any good to speculate about.
Bruce, did you want to have a comment?
Only that it's obviously an extremely public statement he's made, you know, in the most graphic way. I mean, he's taken it right to the headquarters of this the Christian lobby to basically kill himself or come close to doing it. So we'll hear more about it, and we'll find out what's driven it, but like John, I don't think we can really speculate too deeply on it at the moment.
All right, let's move to some of the other issues that are really bubbling along, even though it's just a few days before Christmas. It's never a dull moment in politics. Right-wing Senator Cori Bernardi, John Hewson, he's been talking about, you know, a massive 2017. He put that on his own website, yes, on the Australian Conservatives website. The Australian is now running this story that he's on the brink of splitting from the coalition. Now, some Liberals Sky News has spoken to this morning saying, Cori, don't do that, stay within the party. But others do seem to be stirring the issue and saying, well, unless Malcolm Turnbull gets back to the base and looks after the base, well, you know, we may not be able to stay loyal.
Yeah, look, I think there's a very real movement here. Whether it actually eventuates is not probably worth speculating about at this time. But I do think it's significant that there is a rump in the Liberal Party, and of course backed up by a number in the National Party, who feel that there isn't a true conservative force in this country. It's tapping into the Trump mood, the Brexit mood, the Hanson mood. They're obviously quite concerned about Hanson and the impact that she might have electorally, and she will have a significant impact. As we said previously, I mean, in forthcoming elections, she is going to have a serious impact. But rather than sort of bunker down and pretend this is not going to happen, I think it's time to show a bit of leadership and to worry about some of the issues that are behind this.
All right,
regional
so
Australia is a big issue, for
what
example.
are the issues that they don't feel Malcolm Turnbull is attacking and addressing that's not conservative that they want? What more sort of Trumpist kind of policies would they actually want?
Well, I think they probably want to see much more activity in terms of stimulating the economy.
And
where
in
we don't have a lot of capacity to do that, given that the AAA rating is still on the decks.
And in rural and regional areas.
In rural and regional Australia has been ignored, and there's an enormous focus in the Turnbull government on cities, you know, and a lot of focus on
innovation.
That. Where regional, you know, Australia feels disenfranchised, forgotten, if you like. And there's a lot of work to be done there by both the National Party and the Liberal Party and the Labor Party, if you want to minimise that. I mean, there's a lot of panic going on about Hanson. I think you could do some practical things. The two major parties could preference her last for a start in forthcoming elections. I mean, there are ways of minimising this while managing the arguments. But I think that some of these ideological arguments, and then they're sort of anti-climate, anti-immigration, anti-establishment, in many cases, probably free trade unless it suits them. That's an indefensible position to sustain. So somebody's got to show leadership against that.
All right, but Bruce Hawker, I'll get you to comment on some of those things and what you think about this, but also some of those things are not going to be good for Australia, and yet a number of people obviously believe in them. Cori Bernardi thinks he would have a number of followers. Pauline Hanson clearly already has a number of followers.
Indeed, and this has been the rise of populism we've seen in 2016, and I think we're going to see it again in 2017. I don't see any sign that that's going to dissipate in the short term. I think they're actually going to have to go through this experience of populism and probably realise that it doesn't give them the answers that they want before they're going to have to turn away from it. But, you know, that is the history of that sort of ideology. It's something which has been around for, you know, 100 years or more now. So it's nothing new. And in fact, the one nation phenomenon isn't really new. I worked on Peter Beattie's campaign in 1998 when Pauline Hanson had her first big foray into politics, yes, and it was, in some ways, it was a similar sort of environment at the time. You know, there'd been a long period of Labor government. There was a sense in the electorate that there was too much of a focus on Asia by Paul Keating and others. I disagree with that, but that was a sense of what was happening there. She came along as something of a response to that, was eschewed by John Howard, and then became a figure in her own right in 1998.
All right, now if this happens,
But she could, and what's the point? She could not sustain it.
Couldn't sustain it.
And in fact, her party showed such ill discipline that, you know, that one poor fellow committed suicide, others were forced out of Parliament and so forth, that they really were broken within about 12 months. And Beattie became the stable alternative and continued to govern for another decade or so.
All right, well, if this is true and Cori Bernardi does break away, how is that going to work with the Hanson group, John Hewson? I mean, that sort of ends up being a number of different parties on the right.
That's
it
right.
could very much split the vote and hurt all of them.
I think the name of the game in 2017 is going to be fragmentation. You're seeing it in Europe, you're seeing it in the US, within the Republican Party, more generally in the country, and in Australia. And I think that it may be that, you know, if you get a Cori Bernardi breakaway, he'll be still sympathetic to voting with a Turnbull government rather than the Labor Party, hoping to pull votes off Hanson, where perhaps he probably won't necessarily. So, I mean, I think we're going to be into a world of more and more coalition, more and more, you know, fragmentation leading to more and more coalition in government. And so, I mean, I think that the major political parties need an effective strategy to deal with this. I mean, this is a reality that's going to be there in the near term. I personally don't think it's sustainable. I mean, Trump might come along, he might spend a lot of money, which he doesn't have. The economy might look better for a while, and then it'll implode. We'll have global recession as a consequence. So, I mean, there are big downsides in these games that are being played.
Yep, absolutely. But the challenge for the major parties really is to see how they can sustain that. And I think on the Labor side, perhaps some of it is really trying to go back to their roots a little bit more than they have in recent times. You know, like, I'm very sympathetic to the whole issue of gay marriage, but I don't know that that should actually be dominating the political agenda at a time like this when there's so many other things to be talking about. You know, I think you need to be careful on the progressive side of politics.
So that's a message even for your side of politics?
Absolutely. I think we have to make sure that, you know, on the Labor side, we're focused on health, education, infrastructure, services. The sorts of things that people in Western Sydney are going to be very sympathetic to.
But also in Toowoomba and Townsville and
in
regional
Australia, where people like Peter Beattie, Bob Carr and others, and, you know, and Bob Hawke, when he was Prime Minister, were very effective in presenting a broad church to in the Labor Party to the Australian electorate. Not so much now.
All right, just to finish up on this, what danger does this really propose Malcolm Turnbull? Briefly, Bruce.
Well, I think it's going to be harder for him to control the Senate, so he's going to have much more difficulty getting his policies through, and he's going to come under more pressure from the Conservatives inside his own party.
John?
Look, it's a challenge of his management ability in terms of the party. I mean, this is a manageable situation if you address it correctly. I mean, sure, look, the most likely sort of downside for Turnbull is sort of somebody having a heart attack or, you know, by-election or some extreme event which causes his numbers to dwindle. But if there's a breakaway with Bernardi, he'll have to negotiate with Bernardi, just like he'll have to negotiate with Hanson. As I say, it's going to be, I think 2017 is going to be a year of fragmentation and coalition.
All right, and that we haven't even really talked policies for 2017, but gentlemen, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me and supporting us all through this year. Both of you, Merry Christmas to you.
You too, Helen.
John Hewson and Bruce Hawker, thank you. Well, coming up.